You're listening to the Control System Integrators Association's Talking Industrial Automation podcast, where you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. Now, here is your host, Tony Verhoeven.
Thanks for downloading the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. This is a show to help you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. I'll be talking industrial automation with CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve manufacturing and process challenges, and how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, I hope you will enjoy the insights CSIA members will bring to this podcast. Hi, it's Tony Verhoeven, and we're talking industrial automation with Rick Vanden Boom of Applied Manufacturing Technologies. He is the Automated Systems Group Director at AMT. Rick has over 30 years of experience in the manufacturing automation industry. His background includes application engineering, sales, and operations management. He has worked for several international companies across multiple industries and has a track record of success in product development and new market introductions. Welcome, Rick.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me this morning, Tony.
I appreciate you taking the time here. I know you've got a client meeting coming up here. That's part of that sales, maybe that sales role that you've got in there as well. So we won't take too much time, but I do want to take a little bit of a deep dive into, our CSI members. A lot of people, when they ask them to do the podcast, they're a little intimidated. They're like, what do I say? What are the questions? And I just say, hey, we're having a conversation because listeners, like your prospective clients, want to know who you are. They'll do business with you if they like, know, and trust you. So let's help them do that. So that's the purpose of today's talk and the podcast, is just to help people get to know CSI members and kind of what their motivations are, what their skills are. Of course, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So thanks so much. So Rick, let me tee you up here. Tell me a little bit, maybe go a little deeper, and then what I've already covered in your bio and what you sent me. Tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about AMT.
Sure. So, as the bio said, I've been, I'm not a spring chicken here. I've been around the industry for a little bit. I got my start really in electronics in the early 80s. I've been really fortunate in my career to have worked for a number of technology companies. I started out in the AGV business back in the 80s, automatic guided vehicles, transitioned into some vision-based inspection companies, a couple of startup companies along the way. So really these emerging technologies, as you can imagine, from the early 80s until now, there's a lot that's gone on. There's a lot that's going on in our industry today. I landed here at AMT about 5 years ago. Interesting that I had in previous lives used AMT, some of the services they offer, in helping us with product development, implementation of systems we were putting into our customer base, and had the opportunity to join the company in a business development role, actually, and then eventually transitioning into the more of the day-to-day operations of our system integration business. Maybe a little bit about AMT, if you don't mind, to help understand why I differentiate the system integration business. As a company, we really have three thrust areas or focus areas. We have engineering services, which is really where the company started. And when I say that, we offer engineering talent across a broad range of disciplines that are associated with factory automation. We also get involved up front in a consulting manner. So we have a group of engineers that can go in and help companies. Maybe they're just starting up low volume production, trying to ramp up production, trying to increase volume, increase quality. And a lot of times we have manpower issues. What we hear a lot today is that there's not enough labor out there for us to sustain our business. So we'll go in and help them evaluate their current operations, put together the case study for automation, helping with ROI, sometimes developing specifications, and even helping them source suppliers to bring automation into their plants. Then the other area of our business, which I have the day-to-day responsibility for, is for our turnkey automation. So we're designing, building, and delivering automated systems into the factory environment. So it's kind of the, at 10,000 feet, what AMT is all about.
Well, good. So educate me a little bit here, because I'm a marketing sales guy, and so I don't come from this background. So help me understand, what is the difference between the two things that you just mentioned, the factory automation and the turnkey? What's the difference there?
Well, there's not a difference in the factory automation or the turnkey delivery. I guess the differentiation, as I talk about the three disciplines, is really it's an engineering service that we're delivering from the consulting perspective. When we get into our engineering services, we're helping companies. Sometimes it's providing an individual. We'll get a phone call and, hey, my robot programmer's grandmother died. I need somebody to help me out to get this project out the door by the end of the week. Sometimes we have engineers that are engaged on a project level basis. We have several customers that have had our engineers working as part of their engineering team for multiple years, actually, where they don't have a need to develop a whole department of controls or robot programmers, but they have a strong need for a very qualified individual. And what they find with AMT and having our engineers contracted in is that engineer has the benefit of our whole organization behind them. He's not an island unto himself. So that company benefits from our overall engineering organization. So in those services, again, I mentioned before, it's really anything that has to do with automation. We get involved in simulation, plant layout, controls hardware design, controls software, robot programming, even in doing project management for other companies. Great.
So tell me a little bit about, you had mentioned maybe workforce development, and that there's a little bit a struggle in finding good people to bring in there. For an engineer who's fresh out of school, or maybe an engineer who's not a control systems engineer yet, but maybe they might be a good prospect, what should they learn if they want to come work for AMT? Or maybe they don't know they need to work for AMT yet. What are some of the things that they should study or learn or to become, kind of go into that role?
Well, certainly coming to us with I'll say an engineering background, be it electrical, mechanical, but some of the engineering discipline is very helpful. We interact with a number of four-year universities as well as two-year programs, and increasingly we're finding, I'll say, trade school type programs that are developing people into robot programming and controls. But really, what we really hire on it's finding those individuals that have a drive, an appetite for learning, good interpersonal skills. And from there, we bring them in, and we've developed our own university curriculum, if you will. We call it the AMT Academy. So we bring engineers in, and we have a robot lab and controls lab here in our building, and we put them through a boot camp, if you will. And we're teaching them all the basics in terms of PLC controls, as well as basic robot programming, picking up a teach pendant, developing programs. And to really move from there to their first project or first job, they need to graduate from the academy. So, there's exercises that are put in place that they would start with a fresh PLC, a fresh robot, and they need to make, conveyors move, light screens function, robot interact with the conveyor, that sort of thing. So they need to have those fundamentals under their belt. And then we typically are going to try to pair them with a more senior engineer for their first field assignment. So we're not throwing them to the wolves, so to speak, but really finding the best fit for that individual, along with a strong senior person, as a mentor. In addition to that, we do pair up our junior engineers and assign a mentor to them. So even if they're out on projects on their own, They run into an issue. Sometimes it's not even technical, right? We go into plants. A lot of the factory environments can be very stressful. They're maybe having issues with a colleague, maybe with a interaction with the customer. So they've always got a lifeline, somebody they can call up for a little bit of coaching and advice, and as well as the technical aspects of the job.
That's outstanding. I've only heard about kind of that, an internal university at one other company that I've talked to. So that's great that you guys have built that structure. Have you seen that has really helped kind of with turnover and employee satisfaction?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is really understanding and kind of creating a career path for the individual. We're not all created equal. We all have particular interests. Some as we have engineers come in, somebody may be leaning more towards an interest in the electromechanical aspects of robotics versus, I'll say, more of a pure controls track. And so we try to align them with the opportunities to play into their interest, and find mentors that pair up well with them from that perspective.
Excellent. No, that's exciting to hear. Exciting that you guys have put resources into there, because obviously if you've got some sort of individual who's maybe a project engineer who's long in the tooth, able to put some time into that. Obviously, those aren't billable hours, but man, those things that will pay off. Building that fundamental knowledge and being able to play in that sandbox. So I think that's kudos to you guys for building that program.
Yeah, thanks.
Very good. So tell me a little bit about more about AMT's specialty. I guess what we haven't talked about yet is, do you guys specialize in any industry? Do you specialize in any kind of particular? You mentioned robots, so I imagine obviously that might be part of what you guys do. But what sort of work do you guys enjoy doing, or what do you guys really go after?
So again, I'll answer that maybe in two parts. One from a services perspective, one from a turnkey automation perspective. And as it relates to controls and robotics, we're based in the metropolitan Detroit area, and because of that, we have a lot of automotive-based opportunity in front of us, and over time, we've developed a core group of engineers from a controls and robotics perspective that are embedded into the automotive body shop environment. So they understand those processes very well. The large automotive companies have very stringent standards, and those people become experts in that. So we work both directly with the automotive manufacturers as well as large system integrators that will go in and do an entire welding line or glass cells, any of the automation that you would happen to see inside of an automotive assembly plant. So there's a focus area there. Then the other side of those services are over towards, we call it general industry. So we're out supporting other system integrators as they have peaks in their business. They need additional help. And we'll do that both in a time and material perspective. As I mentioned before, here's an engineer to work as part of your team. Or we'll take on controlled hardware design, controlled software design as a turnkey deliverable. So we'll work with that customer's team, develop all of that portion of the project, and then follow through and assist with the startup. So that's really our services area, if you will. In our systems business, again, we're doing turnkey, so it's cradle to grave. We're working with customers. Sometimes they have very detailed specifications. They may have already worked on a plant layout, have the process ironed out, and we're simply helping implement that. Other times, a customer will come to us with basic requirements, and we're basically doing that work. We're helping them establish the process flow, what are the technical components that go into solving that problem, the plant layout. Then we design, build, assemble, do all the startup. We typically would try to do most of that in our plant to minimize the startup time at our customer location, but then follow that to the plant and do that startup. When it comes to our systems business, we really play in a lot of different areas. We get involved with automotive suppliers. Today we do work in aerospace. We're doing work in what I would call general industry. We've one customer that we're helping process egg cartons. So we really look at a wide range of opportunities. New project we're looking at right now is working with an induction heating company that's putting together the coils that go into air conditioners. So many times we're helping technology companies wrap automation around their core technology through robotics and PLC control.
Very good. Very good. Tell me a little bit about some of the, I guess, what's happening at AMT, or I guess in your immediate industry. That's kind of what's really cool. What do you want? What do you want clients to, I guess, to be aware of? Is there something that you see kind of on the horizon? You're like, man, I can't wait to work on that, or this is a new trend that's happening, or boy, I want to tell my clients about this problem. Is there anything kind of going on that kind of comes top of mind?
Yeah, a couple of things actually. I mean, you kind of keyed in on it before. Is our company grew out of the robotics industry. Most of the automation that we would take on will have some kind of a robotic component to that. Say 90% of the systems we deliver have one or more robots as part of the solution that's put in place. So in the robotics industry, the collaborative robots, or referred to as cobots sometimes, is there's a lot of interest there, as well as incorporation of a lot of the new safety devices that are available. Area scanners, different vision-based products that start to simplify the floor space required for an automated solution, simplifies some of the safety requirements. So there's a lot of, and it's the opportunity actually for people to collaborate with those robots in a safe manner. So there's a lot of buzz in the industry around that. We see a lot of requests coming to us to at least consider that. The other thing that there's a lot of buzz in the industry, and we're really trying to get our arms around how we play in that, is really the Internet of Things, or Industry 4.0. So it's big data, it's data collection on the shop floor, and we see that being a natural fit for what AMT has done, and following the trends that we're seeing in the industry. There's some large suppliers of the software for doing that data collection and analysis, but they need people to integrate that as well. So that's we see it as a natural extension of the types of control work that we do. But stay tuned. I think we're all trying to figure out what that really means. It means different things to different people.
Yeah, I agree. The Internet of Things, it's very interesting because it has so many applications. So when it comes to the IIoT, is that something that you're bringing to an existing client? You're like, hey, you guys should really think about taking your analog system and let's go digital, and let's be able to put data in the cloud and be able to report this to multiple locations. Are you bringing that there as a potential revenue source because obviously it's a value add-on, or are they saying, hey, we really want you guys to do this, but we don't know how to implement this, or is it both?
So it's a little bit of both. The place that we're probably putting the most effort in right now is understanding, who are the leaders in terms of the solutions, the software solutions out there. How do we fit in? How do we help other companies? We're working with a couple of companies right now that are integrators, but they don't have the software depth in their organizations to kind of link what they do, to the software. So we really see that as our opportunity is linking that software product into other technologies.
Very good, very good. So, so that's very interesting because I hear a lot of people talk about the Internet of Things, and then they talk about, obviously the first thing they bring up is security. So what do you tell clients about cybersecurity and like, well, we're going to put this stuff in the cloud, but, or, basically you're connecting this control system, then you're connecting the IT and the OT, systems and the platforms here. How do you address that with customers?
It's a tough conversation, right? The IT departments have spent years locking down their networks, plant floor networks, separating the plant floor from their business networks. So and I think we're all susceptible on a daily basis to the hacking and the phishing that goes on. So it's a tough conversation. I think we rely heavily on the people that are developing those core softwares to help with that assurance and working through the technical aspects of that with prospective customers.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it might have been another interview or somebody wise, or a few people wise have said that all the advanced security in the world will not prevent some knucklehead from plugging in a USB drive inside the plant.
That's absolutely true, right?
Yep, exactly. So, well, tell me a little bit about, obviously it seems like customers will maybe come to you with at least somewhat of a thought out plan about what they want to do. You bring turnkey services and maybe they've got some sort of turnkey idea in their mind, right, about what should be done. So do you guys try to temper, I guess, that plan a little bit with what you guys can bring there, or how do you get those to meld? The question I like to ask a lot is, how do you prepare a customer to be a good customer? Because obviously, if they just come in with this plan, then there's no value that you're really adding to the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. So we really want to try to approach it as a partnership, and I know partnership gets overused quite a bit. But to sit down and really talk about, what their needs are, what their motivation for a particular automation project is, how they're judging the success of that. Is it throughput? Is it a quality improvement? Does it have to do with manpower? And then how do they plan to actually support this automation as it becomes part of their daily process? So we find having those conversations up front, in some cases challenging a concept or a process that they put in place, and try to get that taken care of up front so we're not several months into a project where we have red flags and change in direction, which then it's time, it's money, and those are always difficult conversations to have.
Right. So what sort of questions, I guess, should they ask? Are there some particular things that you want to answer, or is there kind of sort of line of questioning that you want to be able, them to kind of ask you?
Well, that's a good question. Them asking us, I think usually it really starts with us asking them if we're talking about the application itself. Again, what is the motivation? Is it a throughput issue? Is it a floor? Sometimes floor space, reducing floor space to manual processes is part of their motivation, that they can put more technology into the plant. So for us, understanding what their motivations are, I think it helps us then to really focus the development of that solution to meet their primary needs. But in terms of our customers, the things that I would encourage any customer, they should be asking their suppliers, really what is their staffing? How do they execute projects? Are that staff part of their company, or are they contracted? Asking for references, talking to other customers that have worked with them. What type of project management processes are in place? If you tell me you're going to deliver it to me in 20 weeks, how do I know that's going to happen? What are the processes you have in place for making sure that you're meeting my needs, both with technology as well as timing? So I think asking those questions, feeling good about the relationship you're developing with that supplier is very important.
Very good. Yeah. Has there been a project or a customer in recent history, or maybe as legend at AMT that maybe was very challenging, and you overcame it? It was really a great application of your process that you could tell us about, without naming names.
Uh, we have a current customer. They have a very unique product. It's lightweight. It's not predictable, not repeatable. We've been working with for well over a year, and I think every week we have new discoveries as they do. So difficult product to work with, and we've had our challenges where our first attempt in terms of handling that product, we're met with maybe not 100% satisfaction on our part or theirs, where we've had to go back in and look at iterative designs or improvements to certain aspects of that automation. So it's both challenging but exciting at the same time. When you're doing something that hasn't been done before, there's not for example, if I looked at an engine block in an automotive plant, people have been picking up engine blocks for decades. We know we can do it. The product's very repeatable. You start handling product and trying to manipulate product that's not repeatable. You have to be very conscious. It's delicate as well. So how you're touching it, how you're handling it, becomes very critical as well. So a lot of challenges, but a lot of satisfaction in overcoming those challenges. And the result of that then is repeat orders that are coming. And really it's a collaboration with our customer too, them understanding that what we're trying to help them achieve is something that hasn't been done before in industry.
Right. So what you were just saying there was interesting, because you're talking about somebody's making a widget, right? You pick it up, you machine it, you form it, you assemble it, and then move it on down the line, right? And that's what you guys engineer to do, which is a repeatable process. And at some point, the art of that of creating that has gone away. The art is in the design, but I think the cool thing about engineering, of what control system engineers and engineering companies like yours do, is that's the art, and repeating that art is only in the process of doing so, and every customer is different, right? And so you are not making widgets. So what you guys do, and you had mentioned okay, maybe some early missteps or expectations that were not met, but here you are, you're serving it. And so if you were making widgets, you would just add precise calculations, and the end result would always be the same, and then people wouldn't need you, because they would just put it into some plugin on WordPress or online or something like that.
Right.
So it's just interesting that it's like, think about in engineering, of course it's a science, but I think what you guys do is equally an art that requires creativity. So that's just my comment on that.
Absolutely, and I think it's the fun part about system integration. You asked before what is it that we do at AMT, and we're really we're I'll say generalist in the fact we're not only processing engine blocks. There are companies that have a very narrow window of focus in what they do, where we tend to look at a wide variety of applications, and it's challenging. Many times we're doing things that haven't been done before, that we haven't done before, but it's also very satisfying. It's exciting for our engineers. But the work is not mundane. Every job is has a new aspect to it. And certainly we're using a lot of the same tools. We're using PLCs. We're using robots, but the application it gives our engineers a lot of opportunity for creativity.
Very good. Very good. Well, Rick, let's back up a little bit now. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
That's interesting. I was born here in Detroit. My parents are both from Detroit. My father he worked for Kmart, Kresge's in the old days. And it was we were like military brats. So every couple of years we picked up and moved. So I really did most of my growing up years in various areas within Ohio. And I kind of boomeranged back to Detroit. Actually, I was in the restaurant industry at the time, and came back to Detroit for a short stop and met my wife, and I've been here in Detroit ever since. Like I always laugh, my agreement with the restaurant chain I was working for is I would come to Detroit to help open a couple of new stores that they had on the map. But I would only do that if they would allow me to do the store they were opening in Honolulu. So the funny thing is, I met my wife, my wife now for 38, 39 years. Thanks. But we've never been to Hawaii, so it's kind of a little bit of irony there.
Well, that's a pretty good negotiating tool here. Apparently, they didn't take you up on your demands, your offer there.
Yeah. So with that, I was in the restaurant industry. I enjoyed that. But if anybody that's ever worked in a restaurant, it's a grind. It's nights, it's weekends, it's holidays. As we were settling down, decided I'd go back to school. It was the early '80s. Computers, technology were really just skyrocketing. So I really went back and get training in the area of electronics, and jumped into really just by chance into the AGV business as I came out of school, automatic guided vehicles, and I spent about my first 10 years of my career doing that, various roles. I started out as a technician building and testing the AGVs themselves, moved into doing installation and startup of systems, project engineering, project management, moved into estimating. So I think for anybody, especially for young engineers, coming into the automation industry, I think there's just so many opportunities. It's what you have the appetite to do.
Yeah.
We have controls engineers that have been controls engineers their entire careers, and they love it and they're satisfied with that. And there's other people maybe wired a little bit more like me. I'm always looking at the next thing, thinking, boy, that sure looks cool. Why don't I give that a try? And I've been fortunate to have companies that have given me the opportunity to jump in and expand my experience as well. But from that, I actually moved into one of the robot companies for a couple of years, where one of my coworkers recruited me into a non-contact inspection company. Basically, they made laser-based sensors that were heavily used in the automotive industry for verifying the build of the sheet metal components, so underbodies and full bodies, and most people may not know this. When they're building our vehicles, they're trying to build to millimeter type tolerances. So we use this laser measurement technology, to inspect these various sub-assemblies and help the plant engineers make better decisions in their tooling, in the control of that tooling, to basically build more repeatable and more in specification products. So when you've got the framework of a vehicle and a door, you're trying to match up, the door fits in the opening, the gaps aren't too large, bolt holes are where they need to be. So that was very exciting time for me as well. It was technology that was really just taking off, a lot of growth within the company. And that was really my transition more into a sales role as well. I started out as an engineering support position, was able to transition into account management of one of our major automotive customers. Then from there, moved to another vision-based startup company, a company out of Israel. So different approach, different vision-based technology. Some of that was manually manipulated, but then we moved into having that, putting that on a robot, creating full automated cells, and launching that into a variety of automotive applications as well. So my role now at AMT, having all the turnkey automation, is kind of interesting because I'm like a little bit on the opposite side of the fence, if you will. Where before I was with technology companies providing this specific technology solution, and we had the need to wrap the rest of the automation around that. I'm now able to really offer that wraparound service, where we work with a couple of companies I referenced, my former former employers, to be their automation experts. So that allows their engineers to focus on their core technologies and the things that they do best, and let our engineers who understand the automation and the safety requirements, how to make different technologies talk to one another. So let us focus on that. Let their engineers focus on what they do best, and it provides a nice partnership.
So, Rick, when you were talking about kind of making that transition into engineering, you had mentioned you're in the restaurant industry. Were you going to school at the time? Are you trained as an engineer, or are you electrical engineer? Or where did you go to school? And tell me about that process.
Sure. So I went through it was National Institute of Technology, and really it was an engineering trade school, if you will. And the focus there was on electronics. We were working at the time as a transition. Believe it or not, some of my early classes were about, some of the tube and transistor technology that we used to use in our televisions. And at that point, everything was transitioning to, IC chips, to microprocessors. So the training was very specific, more in, I'll say, in a technical, hands-on nature, as opposed to all of the electrical engineering theoretical aspects of that discipline.
Where was that at?
It was based here in Detroit, in Livonia, Michigan. It was a 24-month program, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So it was pretty intense. I guess a little bit of a boot camp mentality to it. And coming out of that, it gave me the skills to get into really working hands-on with electronics.
So have you always had this kind of engineering mindset? I mean, as a kid, were you tearing stuff apart?
Yeah, I like to tinker. I like to tinker with. I still do. It's hard to take that thing that doesn't quite work anymore and put it out to the curb, right? It's like, put it on the workbench and I'll let me take a look at that. So, my grandkids call me the fixer guy. If something doesn't quite work, we'll take it to Papa. So right,
exactly, right. It's like, it's a vacuum cleaner, it needs a belt, or you can put in a new gear or something here to give it some more life, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, my wife, we were just talking about this the other day about some frustrating appliances, and my wife, we won't blame her, but 2 vacuum cleaners failed her in one day, so it was quite frustrating here as we had company coming over here. And I don't have, when I take stuff apart, and put it back together, there's pieces left over, so I do not have that brain or that DNA.
Yeah.
It had to go at the curb.
I think sometimes my wife wishes I was a little more like that. So, and we recently, ice maker went out on the refrigerator, and she wanted to call the repairman. Of course, I couldn't have that. But the result was it took about 3 weeks for me to get to that little project, and buying bagged ice in the meantime. So
right. That's the funny thing is sometimes you have to kind of like, okay, I can fix this, or I can go to YouTube and learn how to fix this because somebody else has probably already learned how to do this. But there's the learning curve and the time and your spouse's frustration as you've got like everything torn apart or whatever. So sometimes you just have to kind of pay the man. Very good. So tell me about what some of the skills that you've developed, even soft skills that you've developed kind of in your day-to-day work and working with customers. Obviously, you've got the technical know-how here. What are some of the other skills that you point to in your success?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, it's a pretty common adage, but, listen more than you talk. I think, listening to what people have to say, observing, you walk into a plant, watching how people are working, how they're interacting, how machinery is working, I think it's very insightful, and then many times, spending a little bit of time and not trying to rush through that part of it, or rushing to tell your story. You learn a lot, and I think that it provides a lot of value in your relationship you're developing, whether that's with a coworker or with our customers.
Right. I agree here. Well, what are some of the, I guess, things, and maybe this ties back to what you just said, but what would you tell your younger self who's just getting started, who's, just kind of went through your 2-year NIT program?
Yeah, so I guess my younger self, if I look back, I would don't be afraid to take chances. It's always easy to take the easier path. Sometimes I think in terms of doing new things, finding new successes, you guys have to take some risks. So don't be afraid to take chances and fail. Right? Failure is no shame in failing. As long as you're learning from that, and it helps you move forward, I think there's a lot to be gained there.
Absolutely. Tell me about the kind of, how do you open your day? What's your first 60 to 90 minutes look like in your day? When even from the point you wake up, kind of how do you spend that day, and then how do you kind of plan out the rest of your week or your day?
Sure. So I think the last thing I do before I head off to bed at night is I'm thinking about what what the next day looks like. Before I leave the house in the morning, I take a look at my schedule so I understand where I need to have my head. Is it a customer facing activity? Is it a inward facing activity? We have a practice, a cadence here. We have a morning stand up where I have the leadership in our ASG business where we meet, and it's literally we're in a conference room sometimes for 2 to 10 minutes. We stand up, and we're kind of hitting on what are the key things that are happening today that we need to be aware of. And it's an opportunity for people to quickly bring up where they might be stuck, where they need help. And then many times out of that, we'll spin off, short sidebar conversations. So we really start there, and that I do that with my team. And then immediately following that, I do that as part of our management team. So within our organization, there's several of those types of meetings that are taking place. And really allows us to be pretty nimble and react to the things that are most important. So, coming out of that may shift where my priorities are for the next 60 minutes, sometimes for that day. But, coming out of that, then I'm typically touching base with, different areas of our business. So with our design groups, spending some time out of the shop floor, monitoring where we're at in terms of our build and startup of the cells that are there. And chatting with our project managers to understand where we're at in terms of our projects, be they in design or build, or most importantly out at when we're actually implementing at our customer. Right.
Well, Rick, I really appreciate you sharing that with me, and kind of how you kind of approach your day and some of your success, and also with AMT and kind of what you guys do at a deeper level. So I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Yep, my pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Rick. Rick is with Applied Manufacturing Technology, AMT. And Rick, thanks so much. We appreciate you in being a CSIA member. And I think you guys have joined fairly recently. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, we just joined earlier this year. I think maybe back in the March timeframe. A couple of my colleagues were out in California for the conference. So we are relatively new to CSIA, and really looking forward to getting deeper, deeply involved, and understanding how that really helps us improve our business and really our deliverable to our customers ultimately.
You had mentioned something earlier. It really warms my heart, I guess, when I hear members working with other members and integrators working with others. When you had mentioned something to the effect of there's peaks and valleys, And I love to hear stories where, an integrator, all his people are out at other sites or he's a little thin in his staffing, but he's got a customer out in wherever, and he can call the guy down the street or across the country and say, hey, I need somebody. Can you get somebody over to this office or to this plant? And maybe they're competitors, maybe they're just fellow members, but to have that kind of network of integrators who can go help each other out for the good of the client is great to hear, and glad that there's that relationship within the industry and within the organization as well.
Absolutely, and I think organizations like CSIA, create opportunities for that networking as well, and developing the relationships that allow us to do that and to pick up the phone when you have a need. Here at AMT, we have about 120 engineers on staff, and there's times where, even just recently, where we needed to contract additional controls help to finish up a project. Which you say, well, you've got all these engineers. Well, those engineers are committed in helping our customers. And then there's that's a big part of our business, is engaging and being part of those teams. And I think there's a lot to be learned from working with others in your industry as well. Develop best practices, sharing some of the common problems we have, whether it's recruiting, retaining, training, customer needs. So there's a lot of value in that networking, throughout the industry.
Very good. Very good. Rick, thanks again. Rick Vanden Boom with Applied Manufacturing Technologies. We've been talking industrial automation. Thanks so much. Have a good day. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Help others find us by sharing your favorite episode with a colleague, and give us a rating in iTunes. Visit CSIAexchange.com/podcast for a full list of episodes. Contact us at podcast@controlsys.org. podcast@controlsys.org. Thanks to bensound.com for the music.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Read the Industrial Automation blog and find and research qualified system integrators at CSIAexchange.com. For more information on why your system integrator should be CSIA certified, visit controlsys.org. controlsys.org.